once you work more, you're going to get more. That just immediately put in my mind, remove the limitation of, oh, I'm never going to get, like, my best case scenario is get a phone brand new. I tied certain ideas of my self-worth with certain achievements, which, as people know, anything that you tie with desire will always get you a certain downfall, because you're never going to be fulfilled until you fulfill that certain desire. Whatever it is that fuels you, use that. And once you reach that end goal, you can then change your mind later. They were asking me to do pierogies. Like, I'm a dude from Egypt, brown dude from Egypt. You think I know what pierogies are? I was like, absolute pierogies? Pfft. My mother used to do them all the time.
Problems are what? Problems are profits! Welcome to the Problems and Profits podcast with your hosts, Matt McKeever and Rebecca Lynn Matheson. And we're joined today by Mina. But before we catch up with Mina, I want to break down for everyone what Problems and Profits means. And so Problems and Profits to me really is a life philosophy. And it's just about understanding that we all encounter different obstacles in our journey, and how we decide to really adjust or how we decide to react to those obstacles really dictates the reality we get to live in. And so I think a lot of people live in a reality of scarcity, of problems. Everywhere they turn, that's all they see. And I think other people are able to actually lift themselves out of that reality. And instead of seeing those same problems or obstacles, they're able to see profits or opportunities. So that's really what the Problems and Profits podcast is all about. I'm really excited to explore that with Mina. But first, how are you doing, Mina?
Yeah, I'm still breathing, man, so everything's okay. Thanks for having me on. It's a beautiful day, so yeah, let's see where my ADHD takes us today.
Awesome. Well, Mina, we're going to get started with a few warm-up questions here. So one of the favorite questions is, what is the most expensive thing you've ever broken? And you can take that whichever direction you want.
Okay. Well, I've broken a whole bunch of stuff like in my, life, but I guess the most it comes to mind like two examples. So number one would be, probably all dudes have done this at some point, my dad's car. But I, in Egypt, this is where I grew up, and my dad's car, like a car in Egypt kind of means a lot because there's no insurance. You can't finance it. Now you can, but at the time you couldn't really finance or lease it. It's not as easy to get into a vehicle. So when you have a vehicle, okay, you got to watch out. This is going to be for 20 years. So I was driving fast, listening to heavy metal, thinking I was the shit, rocking on. And then I just slammed into the back of a really huge truck. 100% my fault because I was trying to race some other dude. Okay, forget about the reason, but I just slammed right into it. And I remember before slamming into it, kind of when time kind of slows down, I could feel myself coming to slam right into the back of that truck. And all I could think of was shit, my dad's going to lose his shit over this, because how is he going to replace the car or whatever? And then once I hit that, I was just in shock for a bit and called my dad. Anyways, long story short, this cost my dad a shit ton of money. And, in a Ralph's perspective was really expensive because it cost him probably, I don't know, a couple of years worth of savings or something really aggressive like that. And second thing that is, I think, even more expensive that I've broken was a relationship with a childhood buddy of mine that till this day I regret it. You try and fix things and they fix to a certain extent, but they're never full on fixed. And that's one of the things that cost me a lot of, heartache, cost me a lot of time, a lot of thinking. And these are things you can't get anymore. It's not you can form a childhood relationship anymore again. So that was in a sense really pricey for me as well. So,
awesome. Yeah, I really appreciate that, Mina. And the second answer, I think that's the first time we've heard that. But again, yeah, relationships are so valuable. And you got me thinking now about relationships again, and think about yeah, that actually is a valuable asset that we often have. And whether it's because of ego or whatever, it can be really easy to allow those relationships to erode. So I really appreciate that answer.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I wrote a bunch of those, so I do have some experience.
And so question number 2 here is, if you had $1 million in 24 hours and the money disappears after the 24 hours, how would you spend it?
Money, they take it back? Okay.
Yeah, they take it back. So no, just slamming it into a bank account.
Okay. Yeah, like it springs to mind, the whole question of like, what do we do with 3 wishes, ask for 3 more wishes kind of thing. But at least in my mind, I would put it in the bank and ask for a line of credit against that amount. So then I pull out the line of credit. If they want to take the original amount, they can take it. And then I can take that line of credit. What I would probably do is, kind of go to Garyvee and purchase a bunch of useless ads to me, but put a contingent that I go meet him and then work for him for 3 to 6 months for free or whatever I can negotiate at the time. Like, I just want to shove myself into a completely different culture, completely different business. I feel like that's the most valuable thing that I can do that I probably can't do with my own money right now because I'm like a little bitch right now. So yeah, that's probably what I would do.
Gotcha. And definitely appreciate that. Why Garyvee?
Well, okay. Like when I was thinking about it, I wanted to say Elon Musk, but I found like $1 million is probably not going to get me into Elon Musk's on his radar. I thought, okay, like what am I going to like purchase Teslas? Yeah, probably not. So let's go a little lower. I hope, well, that kind of ruined my chances now. If Garyvee hears this, he goes like a little lower, fuck you. But anyways, so I feel like it's a bigger chance that if I go into his media, purchase some ads or, I could weasel my way into a conversation somehow.
That's awesome.
Yeah, maybe I'm
next, I love it. I love it. Next question here is, why are you you?
Okay, yeah. There's a whole bunch of, that's a very deep question. So what do you mean? Like, why am I who I am now?
Yeah, you can take that in whichever way you'd like.
Okay. So in general, like my viewpoint on these things is why is anybody? It's probably a bunch of, genetics, biochemistry, and luck. It's like a combination of these 3. So these 3 I can't really control, and I've been a really lucky dude throughout my life. But the things that I attribute to who I am right now would be like on my personality side, I'm quite competitive for some reason. Like that probably roots somewhere to my childhood, but like aggressively non-healthy kind of competitive, like without any, doesn't have to be something useful. I'm just like, I just want to win. So that's a huge part of who I am. And second thing would be like, I feel a need for certain approval. I don't know if it's from myself or to prove other people wrong or that just kind of mentality where I just want to get this because this is the thing that's going to, get me happier. Now I will be okay. And it never is, but that hunger to reach that thing that is never like his unquenchable thirst, I think defines who I am as a person. And before, like these things I didn't like about myself because everybody, at least in my society or where I was brought up, were deemed, oh, you're really good if you stop these 1, 2, 3 things, which were my flaws. And then I realized later that these are actually features, not flaws of my character that helped me get to where I am today. And that just shift in thinking about your flaws in terms of features just kind of defines who you are moving forward and the story you tell yourself. So yeah, it's probably a combination of all these random things there.
Yeah, I really like that. And there's something that comes with, I don't know whether it's maturity or experience or probably one of the 2 or a combination, but as you get more comfortable with who you are and start to embrace maybe some of your quirks or some of the things that make you different from other people, I think it can actually create for a really great opportunity to be more than what you actually would have been had you tried to fit yourself into the square mold if you're actually a triangle, right? And I think that's a big part of just growing up is really starting to write that one's own individual narrative.
Yeah, I truly believe that as well. And I don't know, I read it in some book where they were saying about, like, it was talking about employees and whatnot, but, you could relate to it to yourself. If you want an employee to do his or her best, or you want to instill a certain character in an employee, you try and reach that employee that in some way that people are talking behind his back that he's really organized or he's really good at X. And once you do that a lot and it reaches him that people think that about me, all of a sudden that actually becomes him or her, and they take on that attribute or feature. So it really made me think, like, the stories you tell yourself, how aggressively you believe them, and how you interpret certain things that are happening will define who you are and will define your whatever abilities you may have. You could just create that story in your brain, and then it will start manifesting it in some way, right?
Mm-hmm. And so, Mina, I feel like there's a lot of different areas we could maybe start off with in regards to your journey or talking about problems and profits. I feel like I know, we've gotten to know each other relatively well at this point. So, to be honest, I feel like I could pick any moment in your past and we could probably find a problems or profit story to build upon. So I'd love to hear, like, which one stands out to you as, like, maybe one of the bigger problems or profits moment where you decided, hey, maybe I wasn't dealt the optimal hand in this situation, but I'm going to make the most of it.
So, like, when I think about these things, because several times, you get this, I don't know what it's called, just the imposter syndrome, where whenever you do something, shit, this is the last good deal I'm ever going to get. Like, this is over for me because I was so lucky and blah, blah. And it still translates into you're getting better and you're getting more deals or more whatever. But looking backwards, at the time, I didn't think of it as like, okay, this is a problem. I need to solve it to derive more profit. It never really was like that for me. It was just a series of good decisions that I made, along with luck and who I am, just translate into profit. So an example of those is why I'm telling you that, like, how you tell the story to yourself translates into more action. So there's two ways I can tell my story. For example, I came here and I worked a little bit on the street, selling some flags, selling some fireworks. I sold water in parks, just whatever I could to make some cash. And I found a guy named Mike Hanna, and he just took me under his wing and he taught me everything. He pretty much gave me all I have today. And, I'm just here right now. But also the other end, you could tell it in a different way, where I came here, I didn't have anywhere to sleep. I literally had 0 places that I call my own, either rent or own, from 2010 till about 2017. Like, I never rented a place by myself. Or even like a room by myself. I was always on a couch or with 3 other dudes in a room. And thinking about that in that way just makes you feel, like you're strong. Okay, I did a whole bunch of shit. And like, one of the most problems with profits situations, like, I could have thought of that as, I'm fucked, I'm so unlucky, but I genuinely thought of myself as really lucky at the time. And it made me think of that problem as actually, it's really good. Like, I don't have any expenses. I could do literally anything I want and I'm not going to be worse off. So it translated into me, selling the flags. I made thousands of dollars there. I got into working for Mike, who was a fantastic pharmacist, and he taught me everything I know and used to throw money at me, literally. I went there on the premise, I'm just coming to learn. I don't want any money. Never asked for money, really. And he started off giving me, $12 an hour, I think. A month later, he's like, here's 15. 3 months later, he's like, you get $20 an hour. I never asked for a raise. And he kept throwing money at me and throwing opportunities. And I was very lucky for that. But I also worked 7 days a week for about a year and a half. Literally 7 days a week, including Sundays, Christmas, New Year, New Year's Eve. Every single day I was working. And he used to tell me this all the time. You shouldn't, I know you expect to relax, and you can, but you shouldn't. And I want you to come here with me. And the fact that he was going made me want to go. So it really didn't translate into, okay, this is way too much rambling, but generally speaking, it's just doing shit and not keeping my mind rolling. Is this a problem? Is this a profit? Is this it? Like, just doing more shit, especially when I was at that age and I didn't have anything. So just indecisiveness was going to be my killer, and I just didn't let that happen. So just keep trying shit, and it worked out pretty well. So yeah, Rebecca, I told you need to cut me off. This is You're not
Oh
starting
no,
off
I
too well.
love it. Tell me more.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
it's great to break some of those moments down, because sometimes those types of relationships or some of those moments can be very defining moments in your journey, and it's really great to have those mentors that kind of drag you along or push you in the right direction, because it really can push you towards something greater than you otherwise would have. But it sounds like, though, you just come from that mentality where you're going to push forward into the next thing. So how did you go from working as a pharmacist to really pushing forward into real estate? Like, what was that moment for you that allowed you to make that transition and make that jump and turn that into an opportunity for yourself?
So like when I first started, like I was telling you, so Mike used to like teach me everything. So I was trying to follow in that guy's footsteps. Like I really wanted to be that guy. That guy had, I don't know, 15, 16 pharmacies. He's really good in a lot of things. And at the same time, he would go and run after new opportunities. Like he could just sit down and not do anything and he'll be a multi-millionaire. And he didn't do that. He used to stand in line in an LCBO, talk to random people to grab whatever business he can. And he's fascinating that way. So the trigger for me was I started, working, and my business is being built, but I didn't see it at the time. I was just working, business is growing slowly, but I'm not significantly well off or anything. So I used to go to him, I'm like, this is not like, I don't know, I'm not making any money. How do I make investments? I wanted to be an investor, right? So he's like, let's just focus on making money first, then we'll look about investing it. And in retrospect, it's probably not 100% true. You probably could have invested, but that instilled it in me, like, I need to work a little bit harder and I need to do more. And once I started finding that there is cash coming in, for me, I don't like keeping money in the bank because I'm like very spendy. Like I'll just throw it anywhere. I have no concept of, oh, this is expensive or this is cheap. Like these concepts don't really register well with me. So I'm like always throw it into somewhere. And starting to look at my life, once you get a little more comfortable, you get to look, oh, like, how's my life? Like, what am I going to do with like my life? Like these questions start to seep in when they weren't there before, because I was working every single hour of my waking life. And once they started to seep in, I was like, this is too much. I'm not going to enjoy my life. And then I had a kid. Kid didn't really know who I am. I started to like hear the words passive income, and it was just like a virus idea. So I took like the opposite approach and just cut down a lot of my hours and sat in a library somewhere near my home, making not much money. Just the business was rolling a little bit, but I wasn't making my own hours, and started getting into stocks and sold some shit on Amazon, and eventually Matt McKeever's videos. And then I met him, and I'm also very lucky because Matt took a huge interest in me with zero reason, really. Like I was just random dude from however many hours away. And I reached out to him and Jeff, probably like 1,000 other people. And he also like pretty selflessly helped me and gave me a lot of information and ideas, which I appreciate, obviously, but it's getting chills. Quite lucky that things keep happening. However, a lot of people may get these opportunities. They're not as decisive enough to pursue it, right? Like, I could have just stopped, because initially when I went to London and I spoke to a bunch of people, I spoke to a lot of people, and Matt knows this, before I spoke to Matt, and they were condescending to me. They were very dismissive. They're just the dude from Toronto. I'm like, dude, I have zero money. What are you talking about from Toronto? My geographical location means nothing to my financial situation. But in general, that was the perspective. And I just didn't give a shit because like, yeah, screw this guy. Okay, let's go to the next one. But like the main thing was, again, to my competitive nature, I'm like, okay, all these are now on my list because I'm going to show every single one of these dudes that I beat all of you. And these things just drive me, not just, financial independence, not like rosy ideas. Most of them are really aggressive and try to win and fuck that guy and fuck this guy, right? So yeah, I guess I don't know what the question was anymore, but
Absolutely. No, it's that like FU fuel though, that like you got it into your mindset where you were able to create motivation for yourself just by virtue of those interactions and changing the narrative for yourself. And it kind of goes back to the story that you're telling yourself. So I really appreciate that inner dialogue that you were able to have all through that time in order to push yourself forward. Because you're right, not everyone will take on those opportunities. There's not a limitation in the number of opportunities that are out there or the amount of success that people have. But in order to actually accomplish something, you have to find that motivation. You have to have that inner dialogue to keep going and do those things that others will say you're crazy for. So I think it's really great that you've been able to just reframe things in your inner dialogue in order to strive towards that success and you know, have that FU fuel driving yourself all the way along. I love that.
No, I appreciate it. Yeah, I think a lot of people will, because at the time you don't know it, at least for me. So I feel like a lot of people should embrace whatever moves them. So some people, because it's not one set of rules that has to be followed. Like, it's only generosity. You only need to, like, whatever it is that fuels you, use that. And once you reach that end goal, you can then change your mind later, right? Like, so a lot of people used to tell me, don't talk to yourself that way. Like for me, when I wake up in the morning and, you know, I've been lazy for 3-4 days, I get really angry at myself. I look at myself in the mirror. I was like, what the hell are you doing? Are you just going to sit around just like an idiot? You're wasting everything. You're a piece of shit if you're going to keep doing this. And this moves me, right? Like a lot of people may get depressed with it and they want to pat themselves on the back. The moment I pat myself on the back, it just destroys my days. Like if I get a little bit complacent, just because of the nature of who I am, if I feel that I'm good, I'm just going to stop. So I just don't like to let myself feel that way a lot of the times. So just embrace whatever moves you. Like anger is not a bad thing unless you make it a bad thing. So for me, anger or like this like aggressive feeling just moves me pretty aggressively and pretty quickly. So I learned to utilize that and not just feel bad that I'm getting these feelings or whatever, right?
Mm-hmm. And so I'd love to explore with you, Mina, I guess two main kind of concepts or ideas here, but I feel like you're constantly putting yourself outside of your comfort zone, trying to force new growth, often taking on new challenges. And correct me if I'm wrong on any of this, but, you know, I feel like in Egypt, you probably had a path to a certain level of life standard that probably would have been fine compared to your peers. But instead, you consistently put yourself into new situations. And if you're willing to, there's a story I remember you telling me once about, I think when you were living in a boarding house in England, and that just really resonated with me about how you guys were making the most of the situation you found yourself in. And maybe through exploring that story or explaining it to the audience, can you also tell us, like, what do you attribute to that perspective or mindset? Because again, like, if I remember correctly, things were probably easier for you in Egypt than they were for you when you were living in England at that moment in time. So yeah, I'd love to just hear you kind of riff on that.
Yeah, so like in Egypt, we weren't like poor or anything. We were kind of middle class, but middle class in Egypt is like me. Our family is just my mom and dad and me and my 2 siblings. So we're 5 people living in a 2-bedroom apartment, which is in Egypt, that's perfectly acceptable in a good area. I wasn't like hungry or anything. I had a good childhood, like no specific pain points there. But for me, like, I just didn't like being just like all the other folks. I didn't like that I had to ask my dad for his car, right? I didn't like that I really wanted an iPhone and I couldn't get an iPhone. Like, it was just stupid shit like that when you look at it. And like, for us to get a phone, you needed to get like a really used one to get, you know, a 3-year-old phone just to feel like really scared if it breaks down. I hated that feeling. And once we got outside, like when we went to England, my buddies and I found that, oh my God, like this is significantly different. For me to get a phone in Egypt, like the same phone would have cost me 6 to 8 months worth of salary. Like not spending a single dollar or pound in Egypt just to get a phone. Over there, you can just get in like a week or two. It doesn't matter what job you're doing. You just pick garbage off the street. You'll get whatever phone you want. So immediately that was like, oh, this is fantastic. I didn't feel it as a bad situation at all. So to put it in perspective, we were living in, I think, well, looking back, that dude was like a really shitty landlord, but we were, I think, like 25 people in a house. And it was the typical, a bunch of brown dudes in a house in England in just zone 3. And myself and two of my really good buddies, we were living in one room, which had a single bed, like not even a big bed, just a single one. And if you were like over 6'2", you can't fit in that bed. And it was just shoved there, no closet or anything. All our bags, like we're 3 people from Egypt, all our bags are just shoved in the corner. And the other 2 used to sleep on the floor, and we used to rotate. Like, okay, one day you're on the floor, next day you're on the bed, next day you're on this part of the floor, because it's better because people won't step on your face going to work. So it wasn't bad for us at all. We used to go to Tesco's at midnight to buy the almost expired ground beef for less than £1, and then come back and make our food. And I was working in a hostel. It's called Bayswater Hostel, very shitty. But I was working as a reception from midnight till about 8 o'clock in the morning, and then changed in the hostel till 8:30, and then made my way to Edgware Road, which is like central London. And I used to work from 9 o'clock till about 5 or 6 in a health food store as a salesman, and just worked, finish 5 or 6, either go home or back to the hostel to sleep like 4 hours or so, then get back to the rest of the shift. And for me, I was like, I'm super fucking lucky, because I'm making what is it at the time, £7 or £6 an hour, whatever. But the equivalent of that is like, I was going to make jack shit in Egypt. So I just wanted to accumulate as much as I can. And the perspective is, once you work more, you're going to get more. That just immediately put in my mind, removed the limitation of, oh, I'm never going to get, like, my best case scenario is get a phone brand new. Like, okay, now I could get the phone and all that. Now I could look forward to a better car or actually buying a place. Like, my dreams significantly increased just by being in that, I guess, environment where you can take money if you want to work. So looking back, I see, oh, that was actually a struggle or whatever. But if I hadn't done that, I wouldn't be who I am today. Like, I would have been one of these guys who's just sitting around like, but like the minimum wage is fantastic. Like, minimum wage over here is absolutely phenomenal. When I first started in London, I was flipping burgers for, I think it was £3.50 an hour, and it was less than minimum wage. And I just wanted to work. So I just went in and never flipped a burger in my life, never washed like a floor, never did any of that shit. But I was like, yep, I could do it. Ruined everything, obviously, got fired from that shit, ruined customers. And then like they were asking me to do pierogies. Like, I'm a dude from Egypt, brown dude from Egypt. You think I know what pierogies are? I was like, absolute pierogies? Pfft. My mother used to do them all the time. But you just figure shit out as you go, and you're going to make mistakes, and it's fine. You just, looking back, all these mistakes meant nothing because it made me who I am today. And I would do that every single time. And we were just chatting, my buddies and I, who were there in London. So one time, a room opened up next to that room. We were sleeping like really close together. It was still one room, but it had like a double-decker kind of bed, and it was a little bit bigger, and it had a bigger bay window. And I remember my buddies and I looked at each other and were like, dude, this is a panoramic view. And we high-five. We're so fucking happy that we upgraded into that other really shitty room with no hydro. So I think once you start telling yourself that you're in a shitty situation, you are in a shitty situation. If you're surrounded by people that are happy because we're in this together, you're never going to have a shitty situation. And I didn't do that intentionally, just to be clear. It just happened to be the way that we were brought up. And, hard work was being a man. Like, that's what we were taught. If you're offered work and you don't do it, you're not a man. So when I was offered another job, when I had a job, well, of course I have to take it. So yeah, anyways, I feel like most people should just embrace whatever challenges they get and stop like the whole chitter chatter in their brain, because most probably that's just going to slow you down. It's not going to help you at all.
Yeah. And one follow-up question I've got to that, Mina, is just I feel like in a way you don't seem to like bog yourself down with what if. Like as in like, oh, what if I decide to do that instead? It seems like kind of once you commit, you go all in and you're focused on how can I improve the situation? How can I like what's within my control? Where again, I think a lot of people, or at least it's easy for me to perceive in other people this perspective of like, oh, I wish I would have had that break. Oh, I wish I would have got that. Where I think you're constantly just you're playing the game so often that you're eventually going to win the lottery, if that makes sense. That's what I really see through the optimism and just the leaning into every opportunity.
Yeah, I feel like that's just generally like there's two parts of it, and some of it I can't like fully take credit for or anything. It's just like I don't have a very heightened sense of risk. Like I don't perceive risk that well. So like it's because there's really no risk if you think about it. It reminds me of I was playing, the Facebook poker that used to be on Facebook is just like you get random chips. And I used to be really, really good at this Facebook poker because if I just got like scared, I would just like go all in and people usually get scared and I get all their chips. And I used to sell these hypothetical or these chips to other people in other countries because Facebook used to sell them, I don't know, like let's say 10 cents a chip. I used to sell it for $3 and just go at a table with someone, lose it to him, and he sends me, $1,500. And when I look at that situation, is a lot of people are afraid to just risk these meaningless chips, really, and they're trying to hoard it. And it's like I was risking it all, and it kind of paid off. So the whole situation of me being not risk averse, like I'm okay with risk, kind of helped me a lot because anything that comes up, like Matt, hey, situation, do you want to go buy this? If it makes sense, just on paper, obviously you do your due diligence, but if it just makes sense as is, like why would I not do it? Because I know myself, if it's not working, I'm going to grind the shit out of it. I'm going to work every day till it works because I don't want to look myself in the eye and say, hey man, like you screwed this up. You're actually not as good as you think you are. And that's again, the narrative that you tell yourself. So I hate looking myself in the mirror and saying, you actually weren't able to do it. So maybe you're not as good as you think you are. So yeah, like I feel just lean into it. Like what's going to happen? What is the worst thing that's going to happen? Like if everybody else is risking shit, it's fine. Like you're okay. I feel like most people would agree, but nobody really does it. So.
Absolutely. Yeah. And just to give, I guess, some context here, because I really appreciate that story with some background and kind of where you came from to get to the point you're at now. How long have you been investing and where are you at now in your journey?
Yeah. So I've started investing like I like to say 2020, but my first duplex I closed was in, I think, October or November 2019. And I've been meeting with Jeff and Matt and all the folks a little while before, asking the general questions. Should I incorporate, Matt? Why are you not telling me if a corporation is important or not? Like these general questions. And I started to like pick up steam quite aggressively just because I get bored. So if I'm like the story that I tell myself again, if I feel like I'm telling myself the same story, like, oh, you bought 5 units, good. But if I keep telling myself that for 3 months in a row, well, you're not doing anything, so I need to do more. And right about now, I own about, I think, 84 units in a week, not in a week, in like 3 days, closing on another 25 unit. And I have another one closing in June, which is another 8-plex. Yeah, which is a really good deal.
So it's been almost over 100 units now in about a year, give or take?
Yeah, a little over, but like let me have the whole 1 year thing for now.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So, and that's a perfect example of jumping in with 2 feet, right? And that seems to be your personality where whatever it is that you were doing along your path, whether it was working at the hostel, rooming with a bunch of dudes, you just were able to see the upside to that and just take it on fully. Even working in the pharmacy as well, it sounds like you were just looking to learn and literally bright-eyed, bushy tail at every single opportunity that came your way. way. And I think there's a lot to be said there in the way that you're going into each situation, because you've really been able to quickly grow this incredible real estate portfolio in a very short period of time, just with that kind of gumption and drive. So absolutely love that you've been able to completely push into that kind of world. So for you now, what is the biggest problem that you're trying to solve? Like, now that you've gotten to that point, what's your next problem?
Okay, so I started realizing that my biggest problem is generally just me, right? Because once you start getting into like whatever, real estate or any other business, you realize that you're just the cap of your own self. Like, there is no actual cap. It's whatever cap you make. And right now I reached close to my mental cap, and I don't like that, because before, when I was working on the street, I knew that this is not where I am, or mentally, I was like way above that. Right now, mentally, I'm a little bit above where I am, but not like that far off. And I feel like that's a big problem. So I've been trying to challenge myself to like think a little bit bigger. And because specifically now, to get into that next level is not going to be the same skill set that I had, which is just stand on the street or talk to more people. I need to develop new skill sets, which is hiring better people and actually managing people and taking full interest in every single individual and trying to empower others, as opposed to just this anger and just trying to be competitive. It's not going to work as well. And I feel like that is that's a downfall of mine that I'm not really good at. And it's going to take a lot of mental changes, a lot of self-development, just to be able to build that new part of me that will be able to build the rest of these things. However, when I look back on it and just sitting by myself, I always smile, because when I was like, I don't know, I think 10 or 11 years old, I was watching a movie. I don't remember anything about the movie, except there was like this big yacht, and there was this guy wearing like green, 80s swimsuits with like the V on the side where all of his leg is. Okay, forget about that. But like, he's standing there with this big ass phone that you can't wrap your hand around, and he's screaming at the phone. I don't even remember what it was, but it was just this problem in his business, right? And there's a party going on his yacht where there's a bunch of girls and, the typical movies from the 90s. And like, this guy was standing screaming at his phone with this problem. And I remember myself thinking, I was like, I really wish I had these problems where, I have everything around me, but I have a big problem that I'm shouting at someone to solve or whatever. So every time when I get like stressed, like, why is this guy not doing this? I remember my 10-year-old self like, dude, you got what you wanted now, so shut up, solve that goddamn problem. And it helps me tremendously for about 3 seconds, and I get angry again. But every once in a while, I like to remind myself, like, you wanted these problems, so solve them and, get the profits, or just stop complaining because you wanted them. And this is really something I genuinely enjoy, these problems, as long as there's not like something super massive with someone's health or whatever. But these problems are generally very nice to solve, especially when like, okay, I'm going to solve this, I'm going to get actual money. Like, this is crazy. It's like a game, but if you win, you get actual money and actual cars, and not like GTA where you just get random points. You just get actual life upgrades when you win certain points in the game. So it's quite fun. And yeah, I enjoy these problems. So we'll see. This next problem is hard, though. I'll try and fix it, but we'll see.
Awesome. Yeah, really appreciate that context. So Mina, I guess one last question I want to kind of explore with you before we wrap up here is just, was there a particular moment that stands out as a potential like breaking point where you came close to maybe giving up on just the entrepreneurial spirit and all your endeavors? And if the case, whether it's yes or no, either way, we'd love to hear some advice for anyone listening to this that maybe they haven't fully pulled themselves up from their bootstraps yet, or maybe they haven't fully taken control of their life yet.
Yeah, so like when I think about something like that, I usually, I'd like to think that I'm this guy who's just going to push through everything. But these moments I actually have quite a lot. Like, I don't know if this is most people, but what I interpret of being this entrepreneur, this person that I am today, is really aggressive downfalls a lot of the time. It's not like I'm waking up every day. Well, how are we going to solve? It's not like that, right? Like I was like, why the hell am I not doing this? And I get depressed if I'm not doing well. And if I'm not achieving certain things, because I like tied certain ideas of my self-worth with certain achievements, which, as any people know, anything that you tie with desire will always get you a certain downfall, because you're never going to be fulfilled until you fulfill that certain desire. So it's okay. It's okay that you're going to have problems and those moments where you feel like shit. It's okay when you're going to have moments when you feel like you're not achieving much or you're ready to give up. I had these feelings, I don't know, like this year, maybe 5-6 times, really aggressive ones too. Maybe I'm more volatile than the average individual. Maybe people are more volatile, but it doesn't actually matter, because when you look at it from like a broad perspective, these small blips in your journey don't dictate who you are. Just if you get that down feeling, whatever it is that pushes you up, if it's self-patting, if it's just getting aggressive, if it's finding someone to, like, I sometimes make up, not make up, but if, let's say, Rebecca insulted me a little bit, I would just really aggressively amplify that story in my brain, not like intentionally. It's like, why is Rebecca saying that? Well, you remember her eyes, how she looked at you? Like, that story keeps amplifying. That just gets me out of bed and to working a little harder. So I feel like we're all, as a nature of being an entrepreneur, you're thinking about the future and whatnot. So you're going to be anxious. You're going to feel down, or you're not doing enough because there's ample opportunity out there and you're not grabbing enough. You're never going to be grabbing enough of it. And there's always more time to do more things. And I'm always going to waste some time on Netflix. So I feel like if anybody's listening to this, because I always had these thoughts and never had like the alternative solution to it, it's just like, acknowledge the thoughts, get down with it, get a little depressed. It's okay. And just know that very shortly, you're going to be out of this depression, and go find that thing that moves you. If you want to get the girl or the car, or whatever it is, stupid thing, just hang on to that and just push forward.
Yeah, really appreciate that, Mina. And I think, again, just want to encourage everyone listening to this, we get to determine whether that is a problem or a profit that we're encountering. And it seems like, I think Mina probably decides everything he encounters first as a problem that he has to conquer, but then he commits to turning it into a profit no matter what it is he encounters. So I just want to encourage everyone at home to, take a page from Mina's book and, challenge yourself to maybe put yourself outside your comfort zone, or focus on taking on maybe some bigger challenges than you currently think that you can take on. But I know we won't necessarily dive deep into it, but right now you're even going through another phase of real transition and about to take on a whole new chapter of life and challenges. And I think that's really awesome and amazing. And understand for everyone at home that for all of us, this is a journey, right? The journey doesn't end until it's over, and you don't want it to end until it's over, for that matter. So it's important to make the most of it while you can.
Yeah,
awesome.
I absolutely agree with that. Thanks, Matt. Thanks, Rebecca.
Awesome, Mina. Thank you so much for coming on to today's episode of the Problems or Profits podcast. Mina, before we take off, where can people find you?
Okay, well, for the love of God, subscribe to my YouTube channel, because this shit is hard. So go to YouTube, Mina, Mina G88, and just subscribe. And yeah, I would appreciate that. Otherwise, I'm on Instagram, Mina G88 as well. So yeah, be happy to chat with it.
Problems are what? Problems are profits!